Fill my life again. I give my life to follow everything I believe in. Now I surrender. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Jesus, shine your light and let the whole world see. We're singing for the glory of the risen King. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave. Savior, He can move the mountains. My God is mighty to save. He is mighty to save forever. Author of salvation. He rose and conquered the grave. Jesus conquered the grave.
Are we live? Okay. Hello and welcome on this rainy Wednesday night. I'm Lance. This is my very hurried friend Doug, and we're going to be talking Psalm 31. And probably nobody knows this, but if you do, I'm actually going to send you the first person to tell me why that I'm doing Psalm 31 in honor of my friend Brandon wins a $10 gift card. I already told you, so you can't say it. But do you ever feel like your prayer life is like you're weaving through traffic? You're just kind of bouncing around? I think we get a little bit of that in Psalm 31. And so we are going to be talking about that. So please join us in a time of worship.
The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at his voice, trembles at his voice. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. And age to age He stands, and time is in His hands, beginning and the end, beginning and the end. The Godhead three in one, Father, Spirit, Son, the Lion and the Lamb, the Lion and the Lamb. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. And all will see how great is our God. How great is our
please pray with me? Father God, we thank you for being an awesome God, for being with us, for loving us when, as Lance suggested, we feel like we're weaving through traffic, and maybe sometimes we feel like we're on the brake, and sometimes we're on the gas, and everywhere in between. But we're just thankful that you're a God who is always with us, Lord. And so as we look at Psalm 31, as we see these range of emotions and see how it compares to our life, Lord, I pray that we continue to be reminded that you're a God of faithfulness and that you're always there with us. Thank you again for your Son, Jesus. It's in his name that I pray. Amen.
Letting go of every single dream, I lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I try to win this war, I confess. My hands are weary, I need your rest. Mighty warrior, king of the fight, no matter what I face, you're by my side. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers, as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings. There's not a day ahead you have not seen. So in all things be my life and breath. I want what you want more and nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers, as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. You are my strength and comfort. You are my steady hand. You are my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good. There's not a place where I'll go you've not already stood. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers, as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I will trust in you. I will trust in you. Lord, let your light light up your face, shine on us. Lord, let your light light up your face, shine on us. That we may be saved, that we may have life, to find our way in the darkest night. Let your light shine on us. Lord, let your grace from your head fall on us. sing, that we may have life, to find our way in the darkest night. Let your love come over us.
You are my shelter, O Eternal One, my soul's sanctuary. Shield me from shame. Rescue me by your righteousness. Hear me, O Lord. Turn your ear in my direction. Come quick. Save me. Be my rock, my shelter, my fortress of salvation. You are my rock and my fortress, my soul's sanctuary. Therefore, for the sake of your reputation, be my leader, my guide, my navigator, my commander. Save me from the snare that has been secretly set out for me, for you are my protection.
I entrust my spirit into your hands. You have redeemed me, O eternal God of faithfulness and truth. I despise the people who pay respect to breathless idols, and I trust only in you, eternal one. I will gladly rejoice because of your gracious love, because you recognize the sadness of my affliction. You felt deep compassion when you saw the pains of my soul. You did not hand me over to the enemy, but instead you liberated me and made me secure in a good and spacious land.
Show me your grace, Eternal One, for I am in a tight spot. My eyes are aching with grief. My body and soul are withering with miseries. My life is devoured by sorrow, and my years are haunted with mourning. My sin has sapped me of all my strength. My body withers under the weight of this suffering. To all my enemies, I'm an object of scorn. My neighbors especially are ashamed of me. My friends are afraid to be seen with me. When I walk down the street, people go out of their way to avoid me. I'm as good as dead to them, forgotten. Like a shattered clay pot, I am easily discarded and gladly replaced. For I hear their whispered plans. Terror is everywhere. They conspire together, planning, plotting, scheming to take my life.
But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. Deliver me from my enemies and from those who pursue me. Let your face shine on your servant. Save me in your unfailing love. Let me not be put to shame, O Lord, for I have cried out to you. But let the wicked be put to shame and lie silent. Let their lying lips be silenced. For with pride and contempt they speak arrogantly against the righteous.
Your overflowing goodness you have kept for those who live in awe of you, and you share your goodness with those who make you their sanctuary. You hide them, you shelter them in your presence, safe from the conspiracies of sinful men. You keep them in your tent, safe from the slander of accusing tongues.
Blessed be Eternal, for he has revealed his gracious love to me when I was trapped like a city under siege. I began to panic, so I yelled out, I'm cut off! You no longer see me! But you heard my cry for help that day when I called out to you.
Bless the Lord, all his faithful people. The Lord preserves those who are true to him, but the proud he pays back in full. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord.
Well, I really have enjoyed the time that we've spent in the Psalms over the last several months. And I've enjoyed our conversations both during the live stream or the class and before that. But one thing I don't want to take for granted is just spending time in the Psalms. And I hope you enjoyed. I know it was the first few minutes of listening, but it was truly worth it. In fact, we could rewind that and play that 3 or 4 more times. And to me, this psalm really speaks to me. It resonates more than almost any other psalm that we've done, or probably anyone will ever do. It is just filled with emotion, and it's emotion that's sometimes high and it's sometimes low, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I really appreciate, for those of you who heard the different voices, those were different members who we called upon and asked if they'd be willing to read that and kind of get this idea of, okay, we have one thing that David's saying, and then it's almost like he shifts gears. I mean, he is grinding the clutch. I mean, he's going first gear, reverse, fifth gear. It's just all over the place. But you know what? I kind of think that's a little bit how life is like.
It's how I pray. I wish that I had these perfectly ordered prayers, and sometimes there's some model prayers that I like to do that kind of keep me focused. But when I'm just pouring my heart out, it's like, okay, God, I have 7 thoughts. And if you were keeping count, there were 7 voices there that kind of follow the 7 thoughts. And for you 7 folks who did that, thank you. We are going to do that again. I love that.
That was really great.
Yes.
But just listening to that, I mean, it reminded me of like trying to teach a 15-year-old how to use like a manual transmission. I mean, it's just like you get whiplash. Like, what is going on here? It's like things are good, things are, and it's really kind of crazy. So I hope y'all caught a sense of that as we look into this. There's just a few things I want to point out about Psalm 31. One thing is in the title already. It's written by David. David in Psalms is kind of like Paul in the New Testament. If you're not really sure who wrote it, just say, just say David, and you're probably going to be right. And scholars certainly believe that David wrote this. They don't know when he might have written it, but there's good reason to believe that maybe it's when he was on the run, running from Saul for his life, and that's why we get this kind of anxiety. But I'm going to trust in you, but I'm really anxious, and so we get a lot of that. And then one more thing that's interesting to note, that this particular chapter in Psalms is quoted both in the New Testament, that you'll be familiar with when we get to it in a little bit, but also there's several times in the Old Testament, both in Jeremiah and my favorite, Jonah. As Jonah's in the belly of a fish, he prays a prayer, and there's a phrase in here that sounds like it could have come from Psalm 31. Maybe that was on his mind as he was praying that prayer in that really tough spot. So, anything else?
Nope.
Okay.
Covered all.
So I'll start off, and I'll be rereading, because we've done this once already, but it's worth doing again. I'm going to start in verse 1 and go down to verse 4. And most of the people who read tonight, they were reading from The Voice, and I know that's what you choose.
I went out on that one.
You went out on that one?
It's your week. How did that happen?
I don't know. I'm not going to the dark side. I'm just saying I'm open to people reading. But I will be reading from the NIV. So just so you know, as we bounce around and say, "Oh, I'm kind of lost here," it's just a little. Don't be lost in translation. Why is that the first time that I've used this?
I don't know.
That was good. Write that down. Okay. Psalm 31, a psalm of David. In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, and for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Keep me free from the trap that is set out for me, for you are my refuge.
Okay, so I've been hanging out with Doug, who's a preacher, for far too long. I have 3 points that I would like to make right here. But really one means a whole lot more to me. So in verse 1, he says, "You are my shelter." And one of my favorite passages is John 15, when Jesus says, "Abide in me." And I just think about how just like it's been raining, and how important shelter is. And that's how David sets this wonderful psalm up. The second point that I want to make is all the way down in verse 3. He says, "For the sake of your reputation." He's like, "I'm known as being yours, so help me not embarrass you." And I don't think that's a prayer that I think about enough. Mm-hmm. That like, I'm known as being a minister at Taylor Street Church of Christ. I represent all of you. I represent Taylor Street, but ultimately, as Christians, all of us, we represent Christ, and I think we need to take this prayer seriously. But what I really want to talk about is in the second stanza of verse 1, when David says, "Shield me from shame." And I just don't associate David with shame, kind of like a couple of weeks ago, we talked about how David actually suffered a lot. And then I got to thinking about the life of David. So Samuel shows up, he says, "Jesse, one of your boys is going to be the next king." And Jesse says, "Great, look at these big, strong, handsome sons that I have here. And they're all tall and handsome, and they look like kings." And it's like, "Nope, not you, nope, not you, nope, not you, nope, not you." 4 times. It's like, "Do you have another son? Because none of these are it." And they're like, "Yeah, we do, but he's the little one. He's out tending sheep. Don't worry about him. Which one of these is going to be king?" And I just can't help but to think that David probably grew up with that youngest child inferiority. My brother's always picking on me. I know that you can't relate to this in any way, Doug. Doug's the youngest of 3 boys.
No. And I would have been out in the field, but I wouldn't have been the David for sure. But I was throwing rocks at anything I could.
Yeah, exactly. And so David, and his brothers kind of mistreat him right before the Goliath episode. David, after he gets anointed king, he's on the run because Saul is trying to kill him. I mean, he just always had drama in his life. Even later in life, his family is kind of a mess. When he's dancing before the ark, his wife, Michal, comes out and says, "You are such an embarrassment." And he's like, "Oh yeah, well, what about your dad? I took his place." And it's like, he's still chippy about that. Like, when I look back on the life of David, I can see shame, and I'm so thankful that David had the courage to write about it, because I don't think I would have found that in his life, separate and apart from him writing about it, and how shame can actually drive us into closer intimacy with God. And you can think about Adam and Eve in the garden, and I could go on about shame, but I need to give you a chance to talk.
Yeah, that was 3 points in the first 4 verses. So guys, buckle up. It's going to be a long ride. So oddly enough, I do have 3 points, but they kind of coincide. So, and I'll do mine a little bit quicker. But one of the things, of course, he says, if you trust in the Lord, then you're not going to be put to shame. That you won't be disappointed, humiliated, or abandoned by God. Now, you may be disappointed and ashamed and embarrassed by other people, but God will not disappoint you. Another thing is, I think it's important to point out just kind of the situation that he's in. Verse 4, it talks about a trap. This was, it was intended, they intended to kill him, harm him. They wanted to hurt him. This was not like, "We don't like you, we want to take your job," or, we want to kick you off the island. This is, they want to catch him and kill him. They want to execute him. And another thing I think that's really important, and you touched on it already, is about this idea of, for the sake of your name. Why was he calling out to God? Because God was willing and God was able. That he had that ability. That it was God's strength in his reputation that led David to call upon him. And so I think that's really important, that we recognize God has the power, but he also is willing to do something with that power.
Yeah, if he's going to send us, he's going to equip us.
Yes.
And even when things seem really hard, and David spent time in caves, I mean, literally on the run, but he trusted that it doesn't mean things are easy, it means that they're possible.
Yes. And so Lance had this great idea that we would have word bubbles for the different sections. So this first section basically can be summed up with, "Hear me." Hear me is what we got out of that one. So I don't know if I can reach that.
I had all sorts of thoughts. I was thinking of trying to make this into a tweet, 140 characters. I was thinking of doing postures like "hear me," and I came up with word bubbles.
Yes.
So, I don't know.
So
this is kind of a Dougie thing to do, but it was actually my idea.
I know. I'm going to scoot this over because we've got to make room for the others.
Okay. All right. So section 2, I'm going to
that's you.
read verses 5 through 8. David writes, I entrust my spirit into your hands. You have redeemed me, O eternal, God of faithfulness and truth. I despise the people who pay respect to breathless idols, and I trust only in you, Eternal One. I will gladly rejoice because of your gracious love, because you have recognized the sadness of my affliction. You felt deep compassion sorry, when you saw the pains of my soul. You did not hand me over to the enemy, but instead you liberated me, and you made me secure in a good and spacious land.
Bless you. Okay, so there's several things that really jumped out in this section. One of the things is David is just basically saying, listen, if I'm going to live, it's going to be because of God. And that's why he says, into your hands I commit my spirit. And this, of course, is something that we're familiar with from Luke 23:46. Jesus is on the cross, and this is what he cries out, that, hey, I'm going to trust totally in you. And then he's going to go down and he's really going to contrast the difference between God and the idols. He says, I hate those who cling to worthless idols. And you could also translate that worthless idols into absolute meaningless. Like, the difference between God and anything else is meaningless. And we say, Baal or all these, the Asherah pole, I get that, they're pieces of wood, chunk of gold, it's not really a big deal. It didn't create the world, but now let's bring it into our realm and talk about some of the idols that we may have. I'm not trying to step on toes or kick you in the shins or anything, but I'll step on my own while I do it. Like, he says, compared to God, your 401k is absolutely meaningless. The one who's going to be elected president in a few months, compared to God, is absolutely meaningless. Okay, COVID-19 versus God. God is everything. COVID is nothing. Okay, so let's just get a reminder, whatever idols that we have, maybe the idol that we have is thinking that we know everything, or having a great job, a car, a house. My wife has an amazing husband, and for her, that would be a real
Does she
struggle.
have two? Polygamy
You did
legal?
not say that. This is live, and you just said that. You did that to me. Well, somebody backed the bus off of my body. He just ran over me on that one. But those, we have to remember that anything that we put ahead of God is idolatry. And anything that we think is equal or better or near God, it is absolutely meaningless. It is a worthless idol.
Yeah, what I see here is, in verse 5, he's like, I trust you. Verse 6, I don't trust in anything else. And then in 7 and 8, it's all past tense, if you look at that. He says, because you recognized the sadness that I was going through. You felt compassion on me. It's all past tense. So David starts off, hear me, and so you know that things are going to be bad. And then he says, I trust you. And then he starts talking about how another time God came through for him. If you haven't had a foxhole time with God, you have a perfect opportunity to do that now. If you don't have a story to draw on of that time I was down, I was hurting, I really wanted to grow, I cried out and God showed up for me. If you don't have that in your history, you have a great time to start that now. I mean, with all the chaos that's in the world, have some foxhole time with God. If you've drifted away from God, now is the time to remind yourself of what God has done for you, because that's what David is doing here, and it is so emotional. He talks about the sadness of my affliction. He talks about the pains of my soul. He talks about being liberated. I mean, David is emotional here about how he really needed God and God came through, and now he is standing on that promise as he faces a new difficult time.
Yeah, because I'm going to argue, and I think you'll say the same thing too. He's using past tense to talk about a foxhole that he's been in.
Yes.
But I think he's in one now too.
He is.
So, I mean, it's like, it's one thing to like, you know, be in green pastures and say, God, you delivered me. You're awesome. But it's another thing to be like, you're in the foxhole and you're still talking about how God delivered you out of the last foxhole or out of that last pit that you were in.
What do they say on all the mutual fund commercials? Past results are not indicative of future performance. Well, for David, he's saying what God did in the past, he definitely can do in the present.
Yeah, he was saying that. One more thing I want to say before we go on the next one is just, I just love verse 7 when it says, "For you saw my affliction and you knew the anguish of my soul."
Yeah.
And God can relate. He knows the pain. He knows the hurt. He knows the frustration and the disappointment. He knows what it's like to feel the way that we feel. And so when we have these feelings of loneliness, we have to be reminded that God completely understands. He sees the anguish of our soul.
I love that point.
And he doesn't just deliver us on this tiny little rock. He doesn't throw us in a jail cell. He puts us on a spacious place.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Well, and you know, I mean, bad times end. Mm-hmm. They end. Bad times end. It's not forever.
Yes.
All right, so point 2.
You've been there for me.
You've been there for me. Past tense.
I'm going to let you put that
You've
one in.
bailed me out before.
Yes. So now it's my turn. I'm going to pick up in verse 9 and go through 13. "Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and my body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction and my bones grow weak. Because of all my enemies, I am the utter contempt of my neighbors, an object of dread to my closest friends. Those who see me on the street flee from me. I'm forgotten as though I were dead. I have become like broken pottery, for I hear many whispering, terror on every side. They conspire against me and they plot to take my life."
God, hear me. God, you've been there for me before. And now, God, we can go ahead and do the word bubble. I'm going to start with it. The pain is unbearable. We've moved to present tense. He is talking about a current pain. And not only is it unbearable now, this tight spot that he's in, his life that is being devoured, his years are haunted. And then in verse 10, he says, "My sin has sapped me of all my strength." And so also there's a social stigma that's going on too, where he's basically a middle school kid saying, everybody hates me. And he's down to only God. And that's where he's at. He is just being raw and emotional right here.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we finished the last section with, "God, you have set my feet on a spacious place." Like, woo, everything is great. And then we open back up and I'm back in the hole again.
Yeah.
And people could write a different psalm than this one. Why did you do this, God? I mean, why do I have to keep ending up in this place? Can't you do something like make it last a little longer? But instead, I mean, he acknowledges that he still needs God, and it's not like, I'm going to give up on you. You can't sustain me. Yeah. So that's one of the things I thought that was interesting. But another thing I think that really intrigues me is he says, "My life is consumed with anguish and my years by groaning." How many of you have been sick in the last 6 months? Has any of you... Do you remember what it was like in that small window in which you were sick? I mean, for me, I don't know, maybe I'm just a big wimp, but I can get sick, and if I'm sick for more than a few hours, I forget what it's like to be well. Have you ever had that, like you're sick and like, I wonder what it's like to be able to breathe through my nose. I wonder what it's like not to have to sneeze or not to have a stomach ache. And then you almost get to the point where you're like, will I ever be well again? I wonder what it would be like if I wasn't like this. And I think David's kind of going through a little bit of that. It's like things are going bad, and so it's just compounding. And it's like, oh man, things are really, really bad. One question I have though is your translations and several other translations translate this word iniquity or sin differently.
Talking about in verse 10?
Yes. Actually, in mine, it says, my strength fails because of my affliction, not because of my iniquity. And to me, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, and the commentary I looked at, it didn't really even address that, other than that it's sometimes called translated affliction and sometimes iniquity. And those to me are two really kind of big differences.
Affliction is something that kind of seems to happen to you.
Yeah.
Iniquity is something you do.
So we don't know. I personally like affliction better, even though I think iniquity, I think affliction may fit better if this is him running away. But
David's got enough to go around.
He does. It's not like he's perfect or anything. For me personally, I like iniquity because that's...
Wait, did you just say that you like sin?
I like the translation of iniquity. Can we cut? Are we done here? That's two. That's strike.
I know.
You know,
I'm really not like this.
I know. Whatever.
Well,
He's always like this. But I like the idea of saying, yeah, even my own sin has led me to a place. But he doesn't seem to say, okay, I've sinned, I've gotten to this bad spot, and God is going to give up on me. And he still believes that despite the fact that it may be his own iniquity or his own sin, he's still going to cry out to God for relief.
But how quick are we, though, when somebody's going through a hard time, to be like, oh, your sin's totally forgiven. Have you prayed about it? And just like speed past it. Or when somebody feels like they have no friends and they're alone, or when somebody feels this terrible, that we just try to like speed them through it.
Yeah.
David just kind of stews in this. Yeah. Right here. Now, the psalm is longer than this, but he doesn't seem to speed past it. I mean, this is one of the longer sections there, and things are bad. Everybody hates me. I feel terrible. I have sin. And he's totally willing to just kind of go there with that and kind of lay it all out. I think we should be gracious enough to one another and to ourselves to pray this way.
Yes. I am forgotten as though I were dead. I become like broken pottery. Like I'm useless. Like I'm not good for anything. And he feels abandoned, ignored, and forgotten. And everybody around him seems to agree with him.
Yeah. I mean, I hope if somebody came to me and was as dramatic as that, I hope that I wouldn't patronize them and be like, oh, it's okay, get over it. Because David just kind of lets it all hang out.
Yes. That not be so quick to throw a Band-Aid on and say, oh, you're okay.
Yeah. All right.
You've got 14.
14. Okay, so this word is going to show up twice that I think it's a big deal. And it's a transition word, and it's but. He says, but. So things are bad. And then in verse 14, he says, but I pour my trust into you, Eternal One. I'm glad to say you are my God. I give the moments of my life over to you, Eternal One. And I love that phrase. Rescue me from those who hate me and who hound me with their threats. Look toward me and let your face shine down upon your servant. Because of your gracious love, save me. Spare me shame. Second time that word shows up. O Eternal One, for I turn and call to you. Instead, let those who hate me be shamed. Let death's silence claim them. Seal their lying lips forever. For with pride and contempt boiling in their hearts, they speak boldly against thee, righteous, and persecute those who poured their trust into you.
Okay, enter stage left, imprecatory.
Imprecatory.
So this is what we're going to get, and we will dive more fully into a imprecatory psalm later on. But
I think next week.
Yeah, next week. But this is just going to give you a little bit of taste, and it's a little surprising. And next week will be like jaw-dropping. But it's a little surprising to be like, whoa, wait, what did he just say? Did he say that in a prayer? Is that legal? Can we do that? I mean, is that possible? But when he's very upset and he cries out and he wants the wicked to be put to shame. And how does he want them to be put to shame? He wants them to be silenced. And how does he want them to be silenced? I'll give you a hint. It doesn't involve a piece of duct tape. It involves a shovel and a hole and blunt force trauma. I mean, he's like, I want you to bury my enemies. I want them dead. I want them not to be able to talk anymore. That's a prayer that we don't hear very often on Sunday morning.
No.
I mean, it's just very raw and very real.
Yeah, let's save that conversation for next week.
Okay.
But I already pointed it out, that I give the moments of my life over to you. So many times, I think on such a grand scale, like, God, I want to do this, and, this grand thing, and these big ideas. And David, who lived a pretty grand, big life that a lot of us are jealous of, says, God, I just want to give you the moments of my life. Yeah. And how we spend our mornings, and how we spend our coffee break, and how we spend our drive time, that it actually matters. And I'm looking at a lot of teenagers that are here today. You guys have more time, free time, than what you typically have. You can use those moments to get better, to grow, to get that foxhole time with God. Take advantage of that.
Yeah. And another thing that I want to point out in this is the fact that he says, okay, God, you're going to deliver me. And so you make the schedule. You make the itinerary. It reminds me of when you're going on a big trip and you can't wait to get to that destination. Like your parents have said, we're going to Disney World. And maybe they decided that rather than taking a plane, they're going to take a car, and you're going to have this fun road trip. And of course, you'll stop and see the world's largest ball of twine. But instead of, sometimes we lose sight of where we are because we're so set on where we want to be that we start complaining and say, parents, what do our kids say in the back seat?
Are we there yet?
Are we there yet? And David says, you're going to deliver me. And so the time and the way in which it happens is all up to you. I'm not going to complain about how we get there. I'm not going to complain about how long we're going to get there. All I know is that when I'm with you, we're going to get to where you said we're going to go. But in my spiritual life, I think sometimes I'm like the 8-year-old in the back seat, like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Like, is 2020 over yet? Like, I was always so excited about 2020. I thought that's just a cool year. It's 2020. It's like the year of vision, right? And it's turned out to be, I just keep thinking, are we there yet? Like, I've heard so many people say, can we just eat a turkey, throw up a tree, shoot off a firework, and say goodbye 2020? But I think spiritually, we need to be reminded that if we're calling on God to deliver us, that we need to trust in Him that He's going to do it in His time and in His way, not for us to be kicking the seat of the chair in front of us saying, are we there yet? I really just want to be there.
No, I agree that David says that, but then he does offer some backseat driver suggestions as for how that to happen, and it's to kill his enemies.
Yes, yeah, on the way.
I need some shallow graves.
If my enemy's in the way, we will run right over him. So, wait, I gotta do this.
Yes. All right.
I trust you, but help me deal with these people.
Yeah. I think that's my favorite one.
Yeah. I think my wife mutters that under her breath when I'm around for too long. She's like, just go back to work.
But I think it's okay to pray that.
Yeah. Did you hear that? You have a thumbs up from Lance to pray that. It is okay, Jennifer, to say, I just wish he would leave. Okay, so now we got section 4 done. How about 5? Is it my turn to read? I've already lost track. Okay, verse 19. How abundant are the good things that you have stored up for those who fear you, that you bestow in the sight of all on those who take refuge in you. In the shelter of your presence, you hide them from all human intrigues. You keep them safe in your dwelling from accusing tongues.
So this psalm has been hyper personal for David. He's talking about himself. He's talking about his past. He gives God a hit list of people that he would like to have killed. And now it gets very general. He says, God, you have been good to them, to those who trust you. And so he takes a step back. Okay, he just got really angry, and then he steps back. He's like, God, you're good to people who trust you.
Yeah. So he has that qualifier. He says that, you're good to those who take refuge in you and those who fear you. I flip-flop those. But then another thing I thought was really neat, and I just really love this thought, is that God stores up good things for us. Like, he knows we're going to have difficult times. And it's not like, he's like, I'm sorry, I'm out of good things right now. Like, he is prepared. He knew that 2020 was going to stink for a lot of us. And he stored up good things. And I think what we need to do is, one, trust that he's going to give us those good things. And two, be willing to acknowledge that, it's really not as bad as what it could be. And even more than that, no matter how bad it gets, we still have God with us. And he stored up good things for us. He is not going to run out. And I love that thought.
In the Message, it says, you have kept for those who live in awe of you. And so again, it's going back to that idea of, God, I just want to give you the moments of my life. I want to live in awe of you. And he's saying, that's who is going to get that goodness from God.
Yes. And so he says, very generally, he says, you are good.
You're good. Verse 21, bless the Eternal, for he has revealed his gracious love to me. When I was trapped like a city under siege, I began to panic. So I yelled out, I'm cut off. You no longer see me. But, there it is again, you heard my cry for help that day when I called out to you.
Okay, so when we started off this lesson, I mentioned that this particular psalm is really close to my heart. I went through, in my mind, it was one of the worst situations that I had been through. Now, I don't want to compare it to yours, because most of your situations that you've had to go through have been far, far worse. But for me in my life and where I'd been, I was in probably one of the worst spots in my life. And I felt like I had been betrayed. I felt like people were around me whispering like he's worthless. And it tore me to pieces. And I found my comfort in Psalm 31. And I read Psalm 31 over and over and over again, and it just really spoke to me. But this particular verse was the one that I could hardly read without choking up when I thought about the idea of being cut off from the side of God. And it just was so gut-wrenching, because although this is past tense for David, it was where I was at that moment. There was nothing I could imagine worse in the world than being cut off from the side of God and him not hearing my cry. And so Lance and I talked probably more about this than any others. And
I think we broke our rule.
We did, because we ended up disagreeing with what the important part was of this passage.
What did you end up writing on the card?
I yielded.
Did you really?
I did.
Okay, I like the symmetry of the previous section, God, generally speaking, you're good. And then in verse 21, I think the phrase that I used is, you're a preacher, and I didn't know that this was personal to you. I just thought that you liked that phrasing of, I'm cut off and you no longer see me, and that's the hyper dramatic part. And I'm like, you're getting distracted by that, because as David writes this, he's talking past tense. Like, when he writes this, he's not in that moment.
Yeah.
He's saying, God saved me from that moment. And so I wanted to say, God, so wait, no, you totally did it.
I did it.
You're good to me. But
I am good to you.
But
God's even better.
But our discussion was like you wanted to focus a little more on the hard time.
Yeah, I didn't, and this is really, I've learned this more from you than anybody else, but one of the things that I've learned is that, like, don't be so quick to jump to the good. Like, be willing to stay in the bad. And to me, like, he is reflecting on something, but he's reflecting on a really, really terrible time in his life. And I want to just sit in that and be like, yeah, you're in a foxhole, or you're in a terrible spot, you're in a well, you're in a hole, like you're baby Jessica, and you don't think you're going to get out. But then there's also this sense of, but I've been in worse places and God has always gotten me out.
Yeah.
And so no matter how deep, how dark, how terrible, how abandoned or lonely you feel, how devastated you are, your plans didn't work out, the test didn't come out right, the person that you loved more than anything else died, and you think, I can't handle this. And the psalmist is saying, you know, God is with you. He's been with you from the beginning, and when bad things have happened, he's delivered you, and he's going to do it again.
Yeah, I just feel like that he is sitting in the negativity and in the hard time back in verses 9 through 13. And here, he's more talking about a previous time where he's contrasting where it nearly sounds like the previous time was worse.
Yes.
So I totally get what you're saying about when he said, I began to panic, and so I yelled out, past tense, I'm cut off. You no longer see me. It makes his present suffering maybe seem not quite as bad.
So you're still saying he's in a tough time. 21. Praise be to the Lord, for he showed me the wonders of his love when I was in a city under siege. So are you saying like he's now out of it, or it's just not as bad as
I'm saying this was the prior hard time that he's already come through, that he's already mentioned.
Okay.
And so I think he keeps bouncing back and forth between things are bad right now, they were bad before, and you bailed me out. And so I think that's what he's talking about there. Is like a different bad time.
Yeah.
Because it's all in past tense.
Yeah.
I began to panic, so I yelled out past tense. I'm cut off. And then that next line again, but you heard my cry for help that day when I called out to you.
Yes.
And so he's talking about a experience in the past, the foxhole time that I talked about earlier.
Yeah. So this is one of those times I really, really, really want to know, where is David in his life when he writes this? And does he write it from start to finish? Or does he scribble some down and he runs and scribbles some down some more? And you know, does he find himself free and clear when he finishes this out? Or is he still hiding from Saul in a cave, knowing that if somebody finds him, he's dead? So I think it's interesting.
If this psalm ends after the I'm cut off and you no longer see me, it's a different psalm, and it's Psalm 88, and we've already done it.
Yes.
Right? And so that but, it's the second time, he's like, things were bad, but God showed up. And I'm looking out at this room, and I just pray that you have a story to tell that has that word in the middle that says but. Things were going this way. I was living my life this way. I thought this way. Things were going bad, but God showed up.
Yes.
I just want everybody to have that story.
Yes, to have that but God story. Okay, so I'm going to read the last couple of verses. Love the Lord, all his faithful people. The Lord preserves those who are true to him, but the proud he pays back in full. Be strong and take heart, all of you who hope in the Lord.
Verse 24, be strong and live courageously. It is courageous to give those moments to God. It is courageous to live in awe of God. And David is in this hard time, and he's talked about a harder time in the past. He's poured his heart out, and then at the very end, he kind of turns into leader, teacher mode and said, guys, it's so worth it. Even with everything that's gone on in my life, it is worth it. It is courageous to live for God.
Yes. I got a couple of things that I want to point out, and then we'll go to song and close out. But one thing, verse 23, it says, the Lord preserves those who are true to him. And I love that word. It takes me back to my grand, that's my mom's kitchen, when she would make preserves, or she would get those mason jars and she would she would put apples or pears, usually pears she would put in there and seal it up. And all of a sudden, like when you got that jar of pears out after several years, it was always so much better than when she first put it in there. And
my grandparents had stuff like that, literally that was 40, 50 years old.
Yeah, and it just like, and I know it's not
twist the top off.
Yes, and pop that, and it doesn't seem exciting. It doesn't seem like, oh, that's great. Please preserve me, But like God is taking care of us and He's protecting us, and we will come out better on the end. And there's one more thing I want to say, and I don't know if this seems like good news or not, but I want to go back to one phrase that we had early on, verse 5. It says, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." And I want you to know and remind you again that was the prayer of Jesus on the cross. And what did God do for Jesus? He left him on the cross. But God, in His wisdom and His love and His grace and faithfulness to all of us, allowed His Son to utter those words. And when every part of Him wanted to say, I'm going to go rescue my son, instead He said that every one of you in here and all of you listening and everybody in the world, you are worth it. And you can cry out to God, and His response may be, you're just going to have to stay where you are, but trust me, I will deliver you. And so even when we cry out to God, the way that He answers and delivers us probably won't be in the time and the way that we want it. Even Jesus Himself cried out this prayer, and God said, where you are is where you're meant to be, and you're going to stay there until everything is finished.
And that's where the courage comes in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we got the last one is, I changed this one a little bit. You said, guys, live for this God.
Yeah.
And I said, y'all, because I am Texan. Y'all.
I think I had y'all in a earlier version.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay. Y'all, live for this God. The God who's going to rescue us and deliver us, even if it's not the way that we want to or the timing that we want to. That's what David is saying at the end. Look, He's been there for me. He's rescued me. You guys trust Him. Y'all believe it too. Just like that shirt I love. Y'all, we need Jesus, or it says something like that. We all need Jesus. So that is Psalm 31. We're going to go to a song, and then we'll close out. Oh, in just a minute. Oh, I do want to show you the emoji. I don't know if you're going to like this one or not. I know it involves no foam fingers. But this is David. And I think this really kind of encompasses the feelings that he's feeling.
Did you Google emoji freak out?
I just thought, like, what's crazy going on? But I also think that Psalm 31 does this right here. That, like, I am totally, I trust you, God, everything's in control, and I'm freaking out because everything is going wrong, but God is going to deliver me, and I'm in this foxhole, but God, and so I just kind of think that this is the way I feel like this is life. Like,
yeah, I love it.
So anyway, I'm going to try to keep it in the middle, because some of you feel a little bit like this today, like, I'm going to have peace, but I'm freaking out here. So that's our emoji for today, and I'll just see if that'll...
I just want to remind folks that we are still about 3 weeks out of our next food and clothing room, but if you did get a EBT card from the Hobbs schools and you're looking for a way to use that, or if you would just like to go buy some food, that we do have this document at the welcome booth. It is online as well, and it's just a list of the food that we typically stock. If you have questions about that, you are free to call me or talk to John Trammell, and we would love to help you help others. So just a quick plug for that.
All right.
Anything else?
That's it. I'm just get ready for next week. Like, seriously, get ready. It's going to be crazy.
The imprecatory song?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we can do an object lesson for this one.
I don't know. I can go get some rocks.
All right. We'll see you guys on Sunday.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.